Hello, good morning, friends. I'm Debra Huse. Welcome to my studio. This is Art School Live, and today I have a special guest, Kathleen Dunphy.
Hello,
Hi,
Debra.
Kathleen. Hi, so glad to have you here today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Please tell us what you're going to share with us today.
Well, today's the first day of fall, right? And fall is absolutely the best time of year. And fall color is one of my absolute favorite things to paint. And I use a limited palette of 5 colors plus white. And I wanted to talk today about the benefits of using a limited palette and how to mix some of those beautiful, bright colors without getting too gaudy.
I cannot wait.
Me too.
Okay, let's get started.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rhodes. Now, here's your host, Eric Rhodes.
Hi, friends. Hey, this is not Eric Rhodes. In case you haven't noticed, this is Debra Huse. I'm coming to you from my studio in Newport Beach, and I'm very honored to get to host Eric Rhodes Art School Live today. And today, while Eric is away, we have Kathleen Dunphy, and she's going to be sharing all about her limited palette. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about Kathleen. She's a wonderful master painter for plein air, a member of the Plein Air Painters of America, signature member of the California Art Club, which is very famous. Also, signature member for the Oil Painters of America, Laguna Plein Air Painters, American Society of Marine Artists, and Artists for Conservation. Kathleen now lives in the Sierra Nevada foothills of Northern California, and she paints outdoors all the time. With this limited palette, I can't wait to hear what she's going to teach us. So let's take it away, Kathleen.
All right. Okay, folks, so we're just going to look at my palette on my outdoor easel to start with. And then after a while, I'll put some marks up on this canvas here. Please be sure to ask questions as we go along. And tell me if you can't see what I'm doing. And I'll try to make it a little bit more clear using my laptop here. Okay, so as I said at the beginning, I use 5 colors plus white. And these are the colors that I have used for every painting that I've done since about 2006, whether it's indoors or outdoors, still life or landscape or portrait or animal. The only exception, so back up for a second, a limited palette is by definition limited. So there's certain local colors that you just won't be able to get using a limited palette. And so if I'm doing, let's say, a still life where I have my favorite red glass vase that I love to paint, that's exactly alizarin crimson, I'm going to go ahead and put alizarin crimson on my palette. But with a limited palette, even though you can't get certain exact colors, you can get the right value and you can get the right temperature. And you guys all know that cliche that color does all the, or value does all the work and color takes all the credit, right? And that means that if you get the value right and the temperature right, then the color isn't that important. It'll still look realistic.
So true.
Yeah, well, yeah. And it's, you know, it's not like a limited palette or this particular limited palette is the be all and end all. It's not like you have to paint this way. It's not like the only way to paint. There's a million different ways to paint and a million different palettes to use. But this is just the approach that I use and something I'd like to share with you all today.
Super.
When I first started painting, I used every color imaginable. And I always felt like if I just bought the right tube of paint, that I would be a good painter. We've all done that, right? Don't we all have like different tubes of paint or brushes thinking,
totally.
If I just buy the right thing, it'll do the trick. But to me, I found that the less was more when it came to color. That as I honed things down, it really taught me how to mix specific colors. So in other words, if I have a tube of sap green and I'm out painting pine trees, sap green's pretty close to the pine tree color that I'm seeing. So I'll go, well, you know, that's good enough. But if I have to mix my green every time using blue and yellow and a little bit of red or whatever else I have on my palette, I'm going to mix that specific green for that specific tree on that specific day at that specific time. And so you get much more, I feel like you get much more accurate and unique color doing that.
Wow.
Every time you mix it, slightly different. Every time you squeeze that sap green, it's exactly the same. So I think it gives a lot more variety to your work just sort of right away. So to go through my colors here, I start with titanium white. This is cadmium yellow, either cadmium yellow lemon or cadmium yellow light. Either one works. This is permanent red medium. And I like this red because it's kind of right in the middle of the temperature scale. It can go from warm really easily or cool also. And then this is blank, ultramarine blue deep.
I was dying to know what color that one was, because is it black or is it blue or what? So
well, that's a really good point, Deb. The reason that I use the ultramarine blue deep is because it's so dark that I can get a really rich dark with that, and I'll show you that in just
beautiful. A minute. Okay.
So these are my primaries, right? Red, yellow, and blue, and white. So if I've forgotten any of these 4 tubes of paint when I go out to paint, I have to turn around and go back home and call it a day, or find a tube of paint and go back out. But then I have my 2 cheater colors, I call them, my 2 extras over here. And these are just colors that I found I really liked and that I used frequently. So I just added them to my palette. So the first one is Naples Yellow Deep. And that's a really nice color because it doesn't have a whole lot of tinting properties, and you can lift the value. In other words, you can make the value that you're mixing a lot lighter without making it super yellow. It just warms it up a little bit. And then this is cold gray, which is a really nice, kind of a neutralish gray, even though it's called cold. I think it's kind of in the middle of the temperature range. That's good for a lot of things I'll show you, but one of the things that it's especially good for is if you've mixed a color that's a little bit too gaudy. You can, in other words, a little bit too saturated, a little bit too bright, a little bit too unnatural. Throwing in just a little bit of that gray can kind of, what I call calm down a color, make it a little bit more natural looking. So,
okay, I have a couple of questions for you already.
Great. What's that?
Yeah, the gray, it looks like it's a nice dark gray value. Would you say it's dark on this value scale?
You know, unfortunately, I don't use value scales. I know people sometimes have those little charts, you know, that have 1 through 10 and all of that. I find that's a little bit too mathematical for my unmathematical brain.
Oh, you're funny.
I would say I guess it's less than midway on a value scale.
Oh, okay. I thought it was more. Okay.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. I don't know. Sorry, I can't answer that more directly. But if you, so brands are really important. And I list the brands on my website. If you want to look at my blog, you can see all the different brands that I use. And the brand is important because pigments are really different from one company to another.
Sure are.
Well, that particular cold gray is going to look different in a different brand. So KathleenDunphy.com, you can go to my blog. I have all those
super
listed. Was there another question?
I forgot what it was. So just tell us all your secrets.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, so the first thing I do when I go out to paint, well, first of all, squeeze out enough paint. You know, this might look like a lot of paint, but this is what I do for every painting, whether it's a 6x8 or a 24-30, I'll squeeze out at least that much paint. You don't, especially when you're outside painting in plein air, you don't want to lose your rhythm. You know, there's a lot of kind of being in the zone and being, what's the word, flow that they talk about, you know, where you're doing your thing and you don't have to stop and think about the technical aspects of it. And if you have to stop and find your paint and then find your blue and then squeeze it out and then put your paint back and then come back and figure out where you were, a lot of times you'll kind of lose your place in your thought process. So be sure to squeeze out a lot. Oil paint stays wet for quite a while. You can always take the extras, and if you're not going to paint outside the next day, you can put it on your indoor palette. Just scrape it off here and put it on your indoor palette. Or some people will even freeze their palette so that the paint stays malleable a little bit longer.
Have you ever done that, Kathleen, and put it in the freezer?
I haven't. I
haven't either. That's why I was asking.
I've heard so many people do it that I feel comfortable recommending it, even though I haven't done it. I just don't have a freezer with enough room. So if you do, give it a shot and see what happens. So in order to make myself, so for 2 reasons. One is in order to make myself feel like I have a little bit more of a selection instead of such a limited palette, I pre-mix some colors before I start. But I also do this because one of the things that the biggest problem I have with plein air painting is I get too dang excited about it. And I'll jump out of the car or, drop my gear and set up my easel and start painting. And if I just dive in, pretty soon I have a mess everywhere and I haven't really thought things out enough. So pre-mixing becomes sort of this transition time for me so that I can transition between, the running around trying to figure out what to paint and the actual putting the paint on the canvas. It gives me a chance to just sort of settle into art mode and really think about the colors that I'm using and how they're all going to fit together before I actually even make a single mark on the canvas.
Super. So you do that right on location?
Yes, I do. Okay. I squeeze out these in the studio sometimes, but then I don't mix anything until I get out there. Mixing paint kind of aerates it. And so if I mix something and I leave a little puddle of it here, it's much more likely to have dried out by the time I get to painting if I'm not painting that.
Or freeze. Because you're always in the snow.
Yes, there is that.
That's funny.
Well, I should do another talk on painting in the snow because that's an awfully fun thing to do. So, okay, so the first thing that I always do when I go out to paint, regardless of the subject matter, is I mix my darkest dark that I can make with this palette, and then I mix my secondary colors. So first we'll do my darkest dark. So I take a little bit of the blue, and I always put it in the same location on my palette. Your palette becomes your keyboard. Like playing the piano, and you don't want to hit a foul note by accident by reaching for middle C and suddenly you've got it way over on the left-hand side of your
that's
keyboard,
the worst, because you think you're picking up a violet and instead it's a dark green or something. You're like,
exactly.
Oh no.
Yeah. And I've done that plenty of times. So that's my darkest dark, and that is just the red plus the blue, and hopefully you all can see that that's really a dark value. I'm going to make a little mark on this canvas up here towards the bottom so that you can see just how dark this is. Can you all see that?
Can you tell us kind of what color that looks like? Because the red and the blue usually make a purplish color, but the red has a lot of yellow in it. So does it go brownish, or what do you have there?
That is a really good question, Deb, and I'm so glad you asked that. It's just that this blue is so dark, and that red is relatively dark, that this looks like black up here. I mean, that's exactly what it looks like.
Perfect. Okay.
So that becomes, there's not really anything in nature that's going to be that dark, but it's nice to have a super rich dark down there to tap into to modify your colors from time to time.
Okay. That was my other question really quick, because you were talking about the grays, and when you want to dull down a color, you don't use the opposite color often. You just use a little gray, or you do both pretty much? I do both.
Yeah, just depending on the situation and what it calls for. And I'll show you that in just a second. So like Deb said, this just looks like, it's hard to tell what the color is, right? So it should be purple, and purple is one of our secondary colors. Yes. Right. All of you are people out there.
Yeah.
If I add just a little bit of white to this, that way we can see that that's purple. Did you see that? Can you see it?
Beautiful. Yes.
So that's just that plus white.
Perfect.
So when I mix up my secondary colors, red and blue make purple, of course, but that's so dark I can't tell that it's purple. So I add a little bit of white to it, and that becomes my second puddle that I mix every single time.
And it's not very intense too. I like it's a little bit muted.
Yeah, it's a little bit grayed. That's what I like about it. That's kind of what I like about this entire palette, is that it ends up, the colors end up being really natural looking, with the exception of when I mix my green, which is blue. And notice I'm wiping off my palette, and forgot to say, use a nice big palette knife. I've had this one obviously for quite a long time, but the big palette knife you can really mix a big puddle with. If you use those little tiny ones, then you're not going to mix enough paint. So that's just my ultramarine blue, and this is my cadmium yellow lemon. And this makes a kind of a bright acidic color, doesn't it? I usually make it a little bit darker for the start.
Wow, it's a beautiful green though.
It is a nice green, isn't it? So that's one of my other secondary colors. That's a little bit darker.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That ultramarine blue dark. It probably has some black in it or some dark red in it. Or I wonder what is in it, but it does make a beautiful green without being too intense again. So that's really nice. Yeah.
I don't exactly know what the contents are.
Yeah.
I just bought the tube.
Yeah. Cool.
So anyway, so that's one secondary color. This is my other secondary color. And the third one is orange, right? So here's I always put it up here just between those two. That's my permanent red medium and my cadmium yellow lemon. Let me mix that right there.
You got to have orange, baby, because
You gotta
orange,
have
boy,
Orange is the
it goes
best.
into those beautiful greens too.
It does, definitely.
Yeah.
So that's that, you know, one of the reasons for a limited palette also is because I don't know about you, but after I've carried my gear around for a while, I'm ready to deal with anything that's not absolutely necessary. And if I can mix cadmium orange out of these two colors or something very close to cadmium orange, then I don't have to carry another tube of paint.
Right.
And it doesn't sound like a lot, but if any of y'all have done any like serious backpacking, you know, sometimes you go down to weighing like the number of ounces of toothpaste you need to take when you add up all the gear when you're backpacking. So it's the same thing when you're out plein air painting. If you can limit the number of tubes of paint that you're carrying around, then your energy goes into painting and not into hauling all your gear around.
Yeah, so, look, there's 4 colors you've mixed that are 4 less tubes of paint that are in your backpack.
Exactly. And again, it's not going to be, what's that beautiful purple that everybody uses? I can't think of it now.
I mean, my purple, marine violet.
Yeah, it could be that, in fact. It's not going to be that beautiful marine violet. Again, we're limited with this palette, but we can get the temperature and the value of marine violet, and we can use this color as a substitute for that. Not that there's anything wrong with marine violet. Okay, so these are the colors that I mix every single time, regardless of what I'm looking at. And then from there, I look at the scene that I'm painting and I start to mix the colors that I see. I start from dark and I move over to light. And then, can you guys see this palette over here?
Yep.
This is like a separate wing or whatever they call them. This is an open box M that they don't make anymore. But if you can get a easel that has like these extra side things on it, I bought one to put over here. And this is where I mix my lightest light colors. Because once I get going, this gets really contaminated. And pretty soon there's just, you know, paint everywhere. And I'm going to need a place to mix up things really clean. And usually those last highlights are things that you put on at the very end. And so I save this over here for mixing my lightest light.
Nice. Kathleen, there's a question about the palette since we started off with that in the beginning. Can you just go through the first basic colors that you did not mix?
Oh, sure. Yes. So there was titanium white, cadmium yellow lemon or cadmium yellow light, permanent red medium, ultramarine blue deep. I just hit my palette knife in that. Naples yellow deep and cold gray.
Super.
And again, if I spoke too fast, you can see that on my blog on KathleenDunphy.com. Okay, so again, those are the colors I mix, and then I start looking at my scene. And now I'm just going to mix some random colors while we're talking here, just to show you some of the capacity of a limited palette. So I think really the best thing that you can do whenever you introduce yourself to new colors or different colors that you're adding to your palette or a different palette entirely. Richard Schmid, whom we all know and love. Yes. If you don't, Google him, get his books and worship at his altar of great painting. But he does, in one of his books, he shows the color charts that he does, where he mixes every color with every other color, and then he mixes it with various degrees of white. And that really shows you the capacity for what your palette can do. So you don't have to get quite that, OCD about it if you don't want to. The color charts are great, but the other thing to do is to just play with the colors and see how many different combinations you can come up with. But here are some things to think about. So one of the, we talked a little bit about the cold gray. It's a beautiful color to mix just with, it's a little contaminated with yellow that was on my palette, and I thought that's okay because I'm mixing more yellow into it to make a beautiful muted green. Can you guys see that?
That is, it's so handy in trying to achieve the atmospheric distance in a painting is to work from the gray with the yellow, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that's, two different values. Can you see that? Lighter here, darker. But that's the same color combination, the yellow plus the gray. If I use the ultramarine blue again, oops, I got a lot of that, and the cadmium yellow again, and I mix it a little bit lighter, a little more than that. Sometimes it gets a little gaudy at that point. That cadmium lemon or cadmium yellow light can be really an intense yellow that makes the greens a little bit unnatural. So like Deb was saying, do you add the complement or do you add gray? I could add gray, but let's add just a tiny bit of that complement And when I say tiny, sometimes it's just a little dot like that.
Mhm.
Then I add, and it'll really take that color and what I say, calm it down. See how it made it just a little bit less intense there?
Mhm.
Can you see that on there?
Totally.
It also darkened it slightly. Sometimes you have to play around a little bit and add a little bit more yellow if you want to keep that exact same value.
Mhm.
But that makes it a little bit more of a natural looking color. So again, you can mute things down by adding the gray, or you can use the complement by going. So everybody knows the color wheel, right?
I hope so.
I know.
If you don't, you better study the color wheel. It's so helpful. I mean, I think of it constantly while I'm painting.
Well, to me, I think of it more as like the color triangle.
Mhm.
I should have brought a piece of paper over, but I didn't. So imagine a triangle, right? And you have the 3 points of the triangle are red, yellow, and blue. And then if you go directly across that triangle, like if you go across from red, the other two are yellow and blue, right? So yellow and blue combined are going to make green. So if you go across that color triangle, you'll get green. Does that make any sense? Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because it takes a lot more thinking than just looking at the round circle. That's so funny. So you were saying you weren't really good about, thinking through all that stuff, but see, you are. You've got it all figured out. It's cool.
I have to show it on a piece of paper. Let me see if I can grab a pen somewhere. If you guys can bear with me for 1 second.
Okay, so if you're thinking of red, and across from your triangle would be the other two complements, which is
All right.
yellow and blue, that would be green. So that's how you get the complement of red. Yeah.
All right. So we have red, we have yellow, and if I can write backwards, we have blue. So here's red, here's blue and yellow. If I want to figure out what the complement is, I just walk right across the color triangle, and here, right in the middle of those two colors, is the complement of red. So here's my blue and yellow, and the complement of red is
Green.
Right? Okay, so then I have red and yellow, and that makes what?
Orange.
Orange. And so the complement of blue, you just walk right across, and there's your orange.
Oh.
So over here, blue and red makes violet or purple. I'll put a V for violet. And then yellow, the complement of yellow is violet.
Wow.
So to me,
that's so cool. I like that.
That's simpler than the color circle that has 1,000 different colors by 1,000 different names. I feel like all these colors that are in between those, we don't really need to know the name of. We'll if we want to make it more yellow, we just pull that orange over towards the yellow. If we want to make it more red, we pull it over towards the red. To me, simplifying it into a triangle like that made it a lot more easy to comprehend. So hopefully that'll make it a little bit easier.
Super, yeah. You should put that on your blog. That's a cool little drawing. Great way to think about it.
Okay, so let's see other colors that I use frequently. So you might this gray, again, you take the gray and you mix a little bit of that red with it. It makes another really beautiful, a little more gray, sorry. Hold that thought. Makes a really beautiful kind of a grayed lavender. Can you see that?
Wow.
Much more dulled down than the red.
Interesting.
And then again, if you add just a tiny bit of white to that, you get a little more. Oh, that was tiny in the extreme. Let me add a little bit more, and you can see it's a warm, beautiful.
So it's not only grayed down kind of a lavender, but it's also kind of a little bit of a warmer.
Warmer, yes. Even though this is called cold gray, it's kind of a misnomer on this palette. It actually works as a fairly warm color, comparatively speaking. The other thing is that the gray, so you know the mountains in the distance, right?
Yes.
Quick perspective, color, the yellows and the reds drop out, and you have the blue in the distance, like when you're looking down the coast at 𝗵𝗁𝗀 and you see all those beautiful cliffs in the distance, and they get lighter and bluer as they go back. Well, if you just used ultramarine blue, for one thing, it'd be too dark, but if you used ultramarine blue and you added white to it, it's like, whoa,
too intense.
Really intense. But ultramarine blue and white and some gray, then you get this beautiful atmospheric.
That is beautiful. I love that color.
So that's a handy one. And sometimes you might need to make it a little more intense, depending on how a little more intensely blue, depending on how far back you are.
Cool.
But it's a beautiful progression of colors that you can make with that. Can you guys see that with the glare?
Totally. We can see it perfectly. It looks great.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else can I talk about? The Naples yellow. Okay, so if I want to, so let's say I've mixed up this green right here, and I want to make it lighter. I can make it lighter. In other words, make the value higher. If I want to make it lighter, I can add the white, and let me show you what happens when I do that. So I take the white and I mix the white with that. So white is by definition or inherently cool. So see how cool-ish that color is? Relatively speaking, relative to this, that's cool. But if I take the Naples yellow and I add that, sometimes I have to add a little bit more than I would with the white if I want to mix that same value. So there's almost the same value. Can you see the difference in how warm that is?
Yeah, that looks awesome.
Going super yellow.
So that's really fun.
Yeah, that Naples yellow deep is a great color when you want to make the value higher, but you don't want it to get chalky. I don't know if you'll experience where you mix white in and you just, everything just looks a little bit pasty or a little bit like it loses its chroma. So this
people don't realize how cold that white is. It's freezing cold, and you really have to load color back in after you put it to the right value.
Yes, exactly. You're exactly right, Deb. And sometimes it can get really hard to get the right color from your tube paints to get that saturation back to where you want it. But that Naples will bring that value up just a little bit, or as much as you want, and just add a little bit of that warmth to it. Again, it doesn't have tinting properties. If I were to take that much of the cadmium yellow and put it in, it would be a huge gaudy difference. But that much of the Naples yellow just brought the value up and gave it a little bit of warmth.
Wow. So those are two really important colors on your palette, because now I can see how they come into play in your painting so much.
They are. I use them a lot. So
that's cool.
So the lightest color the lightest value color of our two paints is the white, right? I mean, you look at this, this is definitely the one that's the lightest. But there really is, I can't, I should never say absolutes, right? I should never say never or always, but I truly think there's like never pure white in nature. I think that anytime you have a white that you think is super white, there's a little bit of reflected light from something else in it. And so I always, for like, especially the lightest highlights, that's a new word, on the painting. If I take that white, and again, I hope you can see it over there, and add just a little bit of that Naples yellow to it, then I get, can you see?
Oh, that's a beautiful warm white. I love that.
Yeah. So it's not, the value didn't drop a whole lot when I added this into it, because it doesn't have a whole lot of pigment, but it gave it a little bit of warmth.
Yes, because Kathleen, if you add that lemon yellow, then you'd have light yellow. So if you're going to try to use that as a highlighter in a flower or something in the clouds, it's just too much. And so now you've got this. Look at that. I mean, even just a tiny bit of this cadmium yellow, and you get this. Yeah. Well, that will not work on the snow or in the clouds.
No, not at all. Well, you really don't want to use that on the snow. And speaking of snow, I wanted to show you one thing here. So when you're practicing mixing colors, there are these sleeves that you can get that you can stick your paintings in, the plastic sleeves. And I'll put those sleeves on some of the books of people that I really admire, like some of the paintings of Sorolla or Sargent. And then I'll try to mix up the colors on my palette that I'm seeing in the painting in the book, and I'll paint it directly on that.
Wow.
And that way you can really see if you're mixing the color correctly.
That's awesome. And then so do you take a sheet out of the book? You mean like you make a copy?
No. I'll get like a big sleeve. I'll get like a 16 by 20 sleeve, and I'll stick the whole book in there. And then I'll just paint right on top of the plastic. And then I take the plastic off, and I can close my book and not have ruined it. But if you paint right on top of that reproduction, you'll see whether your paint matches exactly.
Interesting.
You're just looking at it up here and then looking at your book over here somewhere. You can think that you've got it right, but you actually are off by quite a bit. And when you're painting right on top of it, you can get much more accurate with that.
Is there some books that you really depend on for, kind of inspiring you for the outdoor painting?
Oh gosh, I think Sorolla and Sargent, but especially Sorolla. I mean, if I could spend half an hour with any person in history, I think it would be Sorolla. I think it would be standing on the beach while he painted those giant paintings with his huge brushes and his suit coat on,
Right, yeah.
I would love to do that. So Soroya is really the one. His sense of color, his sense of light, and also his energy that was in his paintings. Just the passion that just really shows through in all of his work. So Sorolla, look him up and get some of his books and be very, very inspired. Speaking of white, I wanted to show you all. So I take my plein air studies and I put them in these plastic sleeves also. If I'm going to be, let's say I'm using this painting as a reference for a larger snow painting. That way I can mix the color up and I can paint it right on this sleeve, just like I was saying for the books also. I can paint it right on this sleeve and see that I have the right color. But I wanted to show you, so this is a snow painting and it's a pretty bright scene, right? I mean, it's got a lot of sunlight in it. And this is pure titanium white. And look at how different, I hope this works. See how different that is from the white that's in the snow?
Yes, you would never want to use that in the painting. It would look terrible.
Yeah. So even, I mean, sometimes when you're out there painting in the snow, it's so bright that you're just almost blinded by it. And you think, gosh, let me just use that white right out of the tube. But really try to find some kind of local color in there to influence it. A lot of times it's the sky that's influencing it. So you get a little bit of blue. Sometimes it's the color of whatever's near it, like the trees or the willows. You might get some red from the willows in the winter, or some green from the aspen trees, or pine trees. But just really search for those colors and try to make sure, don't make it up, but try to search for them. And once you see them, be sure to put them in. I really try to paint what I see instead of painting from either theory or painting from imagination or what I wish it looked like. So if the snow really, really looks white, I stare at it for a long time and I look at the things around it to try to find the colors that aren't totally white. And then from there, that's what I put down. Sometimes it helps if you can compare it to a white piece of paper, if you hold that up next to your easel. Or if you're painting something really dark, if you hold up something black next to it, you'll realize that it's usually not nearly as dark as you think it is. So
right, that's a good point, because you think those darks are so dark and it's really maybe a little spot that's the really darkest.
Exactly.
Can I ask you about snow real quick?
Sure, yes.
Okay, so when you do the snow and you do the sunlight on the snow, there's a lot of different colors on the sunlight on the snow, and then there's some slight value shifts, of course. But what are some general color go-tos that you would use for sunlight on the snow? Would it be like, go ahead and tell us here.
Yeah, so a lot of times this permanent red is really nice for that. Just a touch of that. The permanent red plus white, let me show you. The permanent red plus white is going to make a very cool color. So relatively speaking, remember, I keep saying that because everything is relative. Everything only looks like what it's next to. So if I have this color next to blue, it's going to look warm. But if I have it next to a yellowish color, it's going to look cool. So this is kind of one of the colors I would go to. But sometimes I'll have to add just a touch of that Naples yellow.
Yeah.
I'm talking.
I was wondering, because you don't want it to be too pinky, you know.
Yeah. So that yellow, that'll cut it down just a little bit. And this is essentially a gray, right? It's not as saturated as that. So it grays it down and it warms it up and it gives you just a little blush of warmth on the top of that snow in the sunlight. The other thing that can happen is you can get that reflection from the sky, but if it's in the sunlight, you don't want it to be too blue. So if you take the gray, tiny bit of gray, just a tiny bit for some of like dips in the snow, areas where it's not getting super direct sunlight, and then a tiny bit of the red again. You can just, oh shoot, that was a lot. Strike that from the record. Let me put a little bit more white in there. See, already I'm running out of room. I wish I had a giant palette that I could take outside and not have to haul it around. Somebody carry it for me.
Oh, that'd be nice. Oh, you could put it on the back of your new doggy.
You know what? She might enjoy carrying it, but she might run off with it too.
Oh, what's her name?
Emma.
Oh, okay.
Emma.
Cool.
And she's safely in another building right now.
Oh, smart.
I was afraid she was going to want to join in on the fun here this morning. So anyway, so that's the gray with the red, and that gives you a nice kind of more of a muted.
That's a beautiful color.
Kind of lavenderish. Sometimes you throw in a tiny, tiny bit of that blue, too much of that blue, and you're just going to end up, oh shoot. my subtlety is going out the window this morning, folks, but I'm kind of reaching around to mix this, so I'll blame it on that. So that's just the blue and the white, but give me a tap of that red in there.
Oh, cool. So you use that red a lot.
I do. You know, it's a good neutral, sorry, not neutral, but like a middle of the temperature range. So
yeah, it's not
remember,
red, it's not orange. It's a nice red orangey color, huh?
Exactly. Yeah. So remember in atmospheric perspective, right? We start out thinking about the colors in atmospheric perspective. We start out, and the warmest things are the closest to us. So things that have yellow in them, or orange, and some of the red, that's going to be closest to you. And then as you walk through space and back into your scene, you get, 100 miles into the scene, the yellows are going to drop out. And you're going to have more of a red influence. And then as you get way back, the red drops out and you're left with the blues. But what's important is that middle area where you have the reds. So in other words, if you have mountains that are not 5,000 miles away, but they're 100 miles away, think about tapping into that red to push them into the middle of that atmospheric perspective scale for color. Make sure to drop out the yellows, because a lot of times, we'll see those mountains in the distance and we'll say, well, they have trees on them, so they have to have green. But really, they're not green. And you have to stop thinking of them as having trees on them and just think of them as a shape and a value and a temperature. And a lot of times that red will be the modifier that you can add to your colors in the foreground to push it into the middle ground before it gets back to the blues that are really far away.
Wow.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah. So when you're working on
point to this,
when you
Go
want
ahead.
to put a little bit of highlight on a distant mountain, say for instance, that you can see a teeny bit of like green in it in the distance, can you sneak a little bit of that cold lemon yellow into the base color to make it look like it's kind of barely green, or would you never put the yellow back there?
Never say never. It would depend on what I was looking at. It just is all relative. As long as that yellow is relatively cooler than, that the only yellow you put in is relatively cooler than the yellow that's in front of it and relatively warmer than whatever's behind it, then you can. You can have some compressed distance with green rolling hills, and you have to. I mean, if it's the foothills in the spring, it has green grass on it going back. So it's going to be a type of green that drops out those yellows. I'm kind of more talking about like when you're looking at the Sierra or you're looking at the Rockies and you have these huge distances. For want of discussion here, that red stays in the middle and the blue ends up at the very back of the scene, the very farthest away.
Perfect.
So let's see other colors. So you're not going to get, as I said, you're not going to get what do you call it, alizarin crimson. That's just not going to happen. But you're going to get a red that's going to be cool like alizarin.
Look at that. That looks pretty close. It's pretty.
It's actually warmer than alizarin.
Getting there.
But that's okay, because we can get the right value and relative to everything else, the right temperature. And then I get the question sometimes people ask, don't you miss having transparent colors? And if I want something to look transparent, that can be in how I apply it. So this that I'm dipping into up here is just Gamsol that's clean. And then down below you can't see it, but down below my easel, I have the Gamsol that's my brush cleaner. This isn't medium. This is just clean Gamsol, so I don't contaminate it with any other color. So I'm thinning this down. And I can apply this really thin and kind of scratchy, and it feels kind of transparent.
It's beautiful. Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about your brushwork too, how you apply the paint.
Okay. So I really, again, as with taking out not very many paints, I don't like to take out a whole lot of brushes. And I like to get the bang for my buck out of every brush. So I usually use either a number 10 flat or a number 8 flat for a lot of my work. And then recently I've been using rounds for some of the work also. So
really, wow.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. One day I realized I was picking up that round brush a lot, and I'm like, well, this is thing. Let's see what happens here.
This is new. Do you like to have a lot of texture in certain areas, Kathleen, or do you ever use palette knife? Or tell us about thin versus thick on your paintings.
Okay, so I do like to have a lot of texture. I think creating physical texture in your painting makes your painting feel like it has depth. So the actual physical amount of paint pulling out from the, standing out from the surface makes the scene look like it has more depth to it. So for example, let's say I have, I'm just going to make some marks. They're not going to make any, real sense. But let's say I have, let's do so the other question people ask is, how do you make brown? And what is brown? Brown is the combination of all colors, right? It's red and yellow. I could have grabbed the orange, but I want to save that. And then you add some blue to it. And it's a little bit orangey. I'm going to add a little more blue.
Because you don't need brown that often in a painting. I mean, it's rare. Do you think, or how do you? No, you like to use brown?
People are like, I miss my fill in the blank color. I miss my whatever that would be. What would that be? Burnt sienna or something like that? And you can mix something really close with this. So let's say I have the burnt sienna down here. And let's say this is representing, I don't know, something. And then I want to put grass in front of it. So I'm going to mix up another color that's going to be really pretty. It's going to
So would you say that scrubbing, you kind of scrub it in a little bit so that it's thin?
Sometimes, yeah, that's how I start. So I always start my painting by making my paint very thin at first, because you want to follow the thick over thin rule, right? So that means you put thicker paint over thin paint, as opposed to putting a wash of paint over some thickly applied paint, which you couldn't do anyway with oil because it would smear all over the place. But I start out that way too, so that if I get too much thick paint down too soon, then I end up with a big mess. So if I start out thin, I can layer and layer and layer and get texture at the end. If I start out too thick, it's really hard to layer more thick on top of super thick without ending up making mud. And we'll talk about mud in just a second. But so let me make sure my brush is clean. So that's really thin. And then I'll take this paint that I mixed up down here, which, by the way, looks very much like yellow ochre, doesn't it?
It does.
And I make sure that I have a lot on my brush. Can you see? That's like a big scoop. And then it's all in the touch. You really need to learn how to control the touch. In other words, you're not going like this every time you make a mark.
Right. Yes.
Not pushing into the canvas every time. You can, but if you also can learn to do lighter marks, then you can get these. You can not have had so much coffee that your hand's shaking. You can make these beautiful marks to lay on top like that. Let me make it a little bit lighter so we can see it better.
Yeah. So I want to talk about how you're holding it. It's almost parallel to the canvas, Kathleen.
Yes, it is. When I have a lot of paint, good point. When I have a lot of paint on the brush and I want to make a lot of texture, it really is. And a lot of times it's just like, see that little piece that's hanging off there? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Like a little blip. It's just the paint that touches the canvas and not the brush.
Right.
And that way I don't make things muddy.
Super light touch.
Yes. Because mud is actually not a color. Mud is a quality of paint. And people talk about muddy color all the time in painting. But mud, this actually looks like the color of mud, right? Right here. But mud itself, so mud usually occurs when people mix. I'm going to put down some light color here, just for sake of discussion. When you have like some light color. Actually, you know what? I'm going to make it a different color so we can see it better. Let's do like a little, if I were doing the sky and I did white with a tiny bit of that ultramarine blue in there so that it shows up on this white canvas. So there we go.
You need to tilt up maybe the camera just a
tad.
Sorry. There
you
go.
Guys see? Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. See that there? And then what happens is people, I should not say people. I should say I have often. I would never do this, but
other people.
Yes, not you guys who are listening, but other people.
No. Right.
If you were to want to put, let's say, tree branches, in the winter, those beautiful scrubby-looking tree branches that go up against the sky. So if you just very lightly apply this into there and accept that that's good enough, the way that then you're okay. But a lot of times what happens is we'll go, oh, shoot, You know, I
Yes.
should have done, and then maybe I need to, and this, and next thing you know, you got mud, right?
Oh
So
my God, everybody does that. And it's such a, you have to lay it down and leave it if you can.
yeah,
Please.
yeah, and it can be very hard to resist the urge. You know, you can also
Yes.
scrape it down and then come back and reapply the paint, but really try to resist the urge to, especially when you're doing delicate things like that. Just say, that's what it looks like, or or maybe I'll come back in and use the back of my brush to kind of spread it around a little bit.
Oh, I like that.
But
you have to slow down and be very intent on what you're
doing.
doing.
You have to like, there's like this pace to painting, right? You know, you first start out and it's like a mad dash going as fast as you possibly can. And then towards the end, you got to just go, okay, let me slow down. Let me think about this. And then let me say, okay, let's go ahead and put some fine work in here.
Now, Kathleen, do you mix everything on your palette and then apply it? You don't actually mix anything on your canvas.
No, do not mix on the canvas. No.
That could be mud.
That's I mean, I won't say never, because there is no never in art, but gosh, it's pretty rare. I mean, I would, if I have gotten the color wrong, like let's say I thought that needed to be lighter, instead of just taking some white paint and kind of going like that, I would go over here and say, okay, let me find out what color that needs to be, or what value that needs to be, mix that up, and let me put it down like I mean it. Whoops. Like that, right? So
yes.
And you know, there's nothing wrong with this. You know, you're not going to get arrested if you do that. But I do think that your paintings are going to have a lot better, more confident feel if you mix the paint and put it down. Sometimes these times of like going, oh, I hope this is right, it ends up making your painting feel really hesitant. And I talk in my workshops about the idea of a sergeant stroke in every painting. So the only thing that anybody ever sees on your canvas, on your painting, is the very last brush stroke you made. So you can have a world of hesitation on your canvas. And at the very end, you go, you know what? I know what I'm doing. I know exactly what I'm doing.
Well, I love this idea.
What I want to do is this. And people go, wow, look at that confident brushwork in that painting. Right. Because they don't see all this junk underneath here.
Right.
So at the end of a painting, when you're finished and you're feeling pretty good about it, and you think, yep, I got this. At the very end, find one area where you go, you know what? I think I can mix that color again. And I think I feel really confident with this part of the painting. And then mix that color up, take a deep breath, stand back, and put it down like you mean it. And everybody think that you just walked up there and banged that painting out and you didn't have 1 degree of angst the whole time you were doing it.
Oh, I love that.
All that's buried underneath there. So
I love that.
I'm giving all of my secrets, but now you know that there's a lot of angst underneath the brushwork and a lot of things to hide that.
Everyone, are you saying that you have angst while you paint also, just like everybody else does?
Oh God, if you could see the thought bubble that goes on while I'm painting, you would not believe it. Somebody was asking about palette knife.
Good to know.
Occasionally I'll use a palette knife, like to make a nice edge like that. But personally speaking, I don't like to be able to identify the tool that an artist used to make a painting. I like to look at the painting first and then go, how the heck did they do that? And get closer and see if I can figure out how they did it. And sometimes with palette knives, they get a little bit of a repetitive, or I don't know if that's the right word, a little bit of a palette knifey look, for one of a better term. So if I do, I usually come back with a brush and either, you know, maybe use the back side of the brush, sometimes use my finger. I'm kind of bad at getting my finger in my paint all the time, just to make sure that it doesn't look too technical. I want it to look really, you know.
So one last question I have for you, Kathleen. You've given us such a wonderful demonstration of color. I just want to watch it again, because it's really full of so many little insights that really will improve my paintings, and I'm sure everybody else too. So, but when you put down that was it your sergeant stroke you talked about?
Yes.
I love that idea, because you're setting something with confidence and you're not going to touch it again.
Right.
Right. So do you set that last stroke and pull it slowly, or do you swipe at it, or do you dab at it? How do you like to apply that last stroke?
Fast as I can, because this stroke right here was made quick, And I can't imitate that stroke going slowly. It's not going to look the exact same. Well, okay, it looked kind of close. But in general, they end up, the brush strokes that are made with lots of energy are going to feel energetic and confident. And the ones that are made with hesitation are going to feel hesitant. You know, there's a lot that comes through that we don't even realize that comes through in our paintings. And it's you know, your emotional state, I really feel like shows up in your paintings. For me, definitely. At least I can see them. And you know, if you at the very end, you're feeling confident and happy and, you know, you're like, ta-da, and that's the last thing you do.
Yes.
It's going to show up that way, and people are going to interpret it that way. We're human beings, and we can pull those emotions out of the canvas when we see them.
Totally. Can you just for fun, I want to see your pretty face again. Can you turn the camera around so I can just talk to you the last couple of minutes?
Yes, let me turn this light off. I'm not totally
Because
glaring.
I love seeing, as you turn it, you get to see your studio too. So it's pretty cool to see that. There you are. Where are you?
Knocking over my lights and everything, but here I am.
That was so fun. I love that. And just, I know we're really supposed to stop, but I want a few more quick questions.
Sure.
Like, how do you like to soften your edges? Give me a quick insight on how you like to soften edges.
Okay, so softening edges can happen a couple of different ways. It can be a physical softening of the edge where you actually take the paint and make it smear a little bit. So this is my favorite painting tool.
Okay.
I use my finger a lot, or I'll use a brush and just very lightly, again, kind of like we were talking about with using thick paint. If you just barely let the edges of your bristles of your brush touch where two pieces of paint come together,
right,
you can see that edge. The other thing that makes an edge feel softer is to bring the values closer together. So if I have, like, again, those trees against the sky, let's say instead of having like a white cloud behind those trees in the sky, maybe I'll make it the blue sky, because that'll be a little bit of a darker value and it won't be so much of a contrast. So those are the three ways that I do that.
Well, thank you for everything, because ending on that confident stroke is really important. People see your enjoyment of your painting. If you, you know, if you can let go of the angst and the worry, and then at the finish, do a couple of like bold little this, that, and the other thing. That just makes the painting come together.
I never want anybody to say, boy, you worked really hard on that, didn't you? You know what I mean? You want somebody to come up, even though it can be frustrating when people go, oh, that looks like so easy. Sometimes, you know, you want to say, no, it's actually not that easy, but that's what I want the viewer to feel like. I want them to think it's really easy. I don't want them to think there's a lot that has to go into it.
That's right. Well, that's wonderful advice. And we thank you so much for your time with us today.
Thank you,
You've been
Deb.
wonderful. We'll see you again next time.
All right. Thanks, Deb.
Okay. Thank you. We really enjoyed that so much. And don't forget to visit Kathleen's website, KathleenDunphy.com. That's DUNPHY.com. Follow her on Instagram at Kathleen Dunphy Fine Art. And of course, go to PaintTube TV, because Kathleen has 3 videos. Essential plein air exercises is one. Landscape painting in the studio and plein air to studio are the 3 videos on PaintTube TV. So I hope you enjoyed today's demo. I have a gift for you from Eric. He says to download the free video, 97 Incredible Art Secrets. Go to 97artsecrets.com/ASL for Art School Live. And if you haven't signed up for Plein Air Live, it's time to do so. We have Plein Air Live. It's online, and it's November 6th through the 8th of 2025. It's got Essential Techniques Day on November 5th, so that you can get your basics going before you spend time with the masters. And sign up at pleinairlive.com. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and Art School Live on YouTube, and at Eric Rhodes on Instagram. And then finally, don't forget to check out my website, 𝗕𝗲𝗺𝗀𝗆.com. That's DEBRAHUSE.com. And follow me on Instagram at 𝗕𝗲𝗺𝗀𝗆𝑎rt. You can also get my videos. I've got 2 videos. I actually have them right here. Impressionism and impressionistic brushwork on PaintTube TV. And I hope that you will join in tomorrow to see our visit with Mark Shasha. He's from Boston area, and we're going to have a blast. So thank you for a fun show today, and I'll see you tomorrow.